What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of NFL Matchups. I am your host, Ryan Flowers, aka Clutch Sports Talk. And as usual, we got tons to talk about in the world of the National Football League. So you are in the right place. So sit back and relax and enjoy the show. This is NFL Matchups with me, Ryan Flowers. Let's go.
We're going to be here all day, baby. I like this kind of party. I like this kind of party, baby.
Welcome back to the episode. But before we move forward, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Grid Network YouTube channel. We really appreciate you guys' support as we continue to grow. As usual, I want to kind of talk about what we learned this past week in the National Football League for Week 9. And one thing that really stood out to me, first off, is the Packers, and not only the Packers, but Jordan Love. You know, I think he's a fantastic player. But what I learned is that they're only going to go as far as he will take them. And I'm not quite sure if he can take them all the way. Now, I will say, you know, they suffered another loss. They're 0-2 now in the NFC North, if I'm not mistaken. They lost to the Vikings, and they just lost to the Detroit Lions 24-14 this past weekend at home. And Jordan Love was a little bit inconsistent. And then to me, that's a big question mark for me, is that he has the ability to elevate them, and then he has the ability to bring them down. It's kind of like a double-edged sword with him when you're talking about Jordan Love. You know, overall, did he play okay this past weekend? Absolutely. Did they get the win? No, they didn't. And a lot of it falls on him. Honestly, he had a big interception in that game and against a Lions team that you really can't make mistakes on because they're good enough to overcome that and still get the win over you, which they've proven to do that, which they're one of the best teams in the National Football League, right? And then not to mention, you know, Jordan Love is still hampered by some injuries. I believe he's dealing with a growing injury, so his mobility isn't the best, right? So, and then just some key critical mistakes down the stretch late in that game where I felt like the Packers maybe could have gotten back into it. But here's the thing. The buck stops with Jordan Love at the end of the day, right? As it is for most quarterbacks in the National Football League. If your team is going to be successful and you're looking to make a deep run, possibly win a championship or a Super Bowl, mind you, your quarterback play has to be astounding, right? It doesn't have to be great all the time, but in matters where it means the most, he needs to step up. And against two really top division foes, mind you, not even an NFC, but two divisional teams in the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions, they just could not get the job done. Now, it's a team effort, but he is going to have to play better in order to elevate this team to get them to the promised land. Some people are looking at the Packers now as maybe possibly being an overrated team, right? And I'm not quite there yet. I still think they have a chance, but he's going to have to get healthier, which is easier said than done. But he's also going to have to clean up some of these mistakes. And I've been on this. I've been on this video, on my NFL matchups, on my Sunday morning show. I've always said this about the Packers. They have to come out the gates playing at 100% full clip from the jump. They tend to struggle early on in games, and then they try to turn it on. But at that point, it's too late in the ball game. So Jordan Love is definitely going to have to be better, and the Packers are going to have to trust that he's going to be better if they're going to make a run towards the Super Bowl. But better yet, they need to start focusing on in their own division and trying to get on top of the NFC North, which is going to be difficult because the Vikings are getting back on track, and as well as the Lions as they sit on top as the kings of the NFC North. Moving right along, what did we learn this past week in the National Football League? I want to talk about the Denver Broncos and their lackluster performance on the road in a big matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, who we arguably think is one of the best teams in the National Football League, behind the teams like the Lions, maybe the Chiefs, et cetera, right? But they came into this game. I think a lot of people were a little bit on the fence, unless you're a Broncos fan who they probably thought they were legitimate contenders. But what this game ultimately proved to me is that they're not ready yet. In a game where I felt like this was a big test for them. And I said it on my NFL Sunday wake-up show because there was a comment made about the Broncos. And I said, listen, if they go out and win this game or even lose respectably, I would give them credit. But the fact of the matter is that they basically got destroyed. And I was surprised in the fact that they got destroyed on defense. Now, I know their offense is a little bit inconsistent, and I know Bo Nix has been playing a little bit better, but overall, this defense, honestly, 41-10. And you played, and I get it, you're playing Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. I believe the Ravens rattled off 7 consecutive scoring drives. Lamar Jackson, I think, had a damn near a perfect passer rating, and then Derrick Henry ran roughshod over 106 yards. So, And it doesn't get any easier for the Denver Broncos. They're sitting at 5-4, I believe now, and they still have matchups against the Chiefs and the Chargers within their own division. So I think they're sitting at 5th in the AFC right now overall. If they want to try to stay on pace to make a playoff berth, which would be actually pretty surprising for me, I don't think it's going to happen just because they just don't have enough in their arsenal at the end of the day, especially when you're talking about competing against the big boys in the National Football League. But after Sunday's showing, it's pretty clear to me that they are pretenders and they don't need to be talked about as any type of contender moving forward unless they can fix some problems on the offense as well as shore up their defense again, especially when they play really relevant teams. So, I was on record saying that they really hadn't played anybody with the exception of that really good win on the road a couple weeks ago earlier in the season against Tampa Bay. But since then, they pretty much played nobody, and that showed Sunday afternoon against the Baltimore Ravens. In my final, what we learned this past week in the National Football League, I want to talk about the New Orleans Saints. They recently just fired their head coach, Dennis Allen, who honestly, he survived a lot longer than I thought he should have, honestly. But that loss that they had this past weekend to Carolina proved to me that they are in a very tough spot. And not all of it is Dennis Allen's fault. Obviously, he's a coach. He was a coach for them. And so on the field, yeah, definitely. But when you look at their roster, they never considered themselves in a full rebuild after Drew Brees retired. And to me, that was a little bit negligent. This team is full of old-aged veteran players, and their salary cap hit by, I believe, is like $62 million. It's making them one of the worst teams in the National Football League. At this point, you got Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, guys that they probably all need to move off at some point, especially Derek Carr. With the trade deadline approaching or past, I would say, or if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if there's a move to be made for this team. Definitely in the offseason, something needs to happen because this team is done. They are in full rebuild mode, whether they like it or not, or whether they choose to accept it or not. And I know the Saints fans, they're a very passionate bunch, and I think they deserve the better. They only got that one Super Bowl in the last 20-something years when they've had really good teams throughout the last 20-something years. And to me, this roster, is not built to win. They tried to go and get another quarterback by signing Derek Carr, then trying to draft Spencer Rattler. That didn't turn out. But the fact of the matter is that this roster was outdated, very aged, and they did not do what they needed to do in order to move some guys around, in order to get some more draft picks and more collateral in order to make this team young, vibrant, and more salary cap affordable. So Dennis Allen's out. I don't know what the answer is for this team because I think they're in a limbo. Really, like I said before, you got guys like Alvin Kamara, who's on the tail end of his career, obviously, right? So same with Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore. All your top players are on the back nine of their careers, so to say. And moving them, I think, would help them, honestly. But does it help the team itself? I don't know, because who's going to want to trade for some of these guys at the end of the day? But the Saints, once a very proud franchise, to me, losing to the Carolina Panthers was just an abomination to all Saints fans, past or present, and this team is definitely in a bad spot moving forward. All right, next up, my favorite segment of the NFL matchup show is Real or Nah, and the first one I have up is, will the Arizona Cardinals win the NFC West? Real or Nah? So first up, let's look at it, right? They're currently top of the standings here in the NFC West after a really, really dominating performance against the Chicago Bears this past Sunday afternoon. Now, when you look at the grand scheme of things in this division, you got the Niners and the Rams, who have coming off of pretty good wins themselves. I know the 49ers were on a bye, but they've come off a really good win against the Cowboys last week. And they've won against those two teams already, head to head, 1-0 apiece, right? The 49ers, I think, are going to get back on track, obviously, because Christian McCaffrey has been activated after IR. And I think the Rams are starting to figure it out. Matthew Stafford's playing really well. Their defense, a young defense, starting to turn things around. And Cooper Kupp is starting to put his stamp on things there on the offense for the Rams. Now, defensively, the Arizona Cardinals, I feel, have gotten a lot stronger under third or second year time coach Jonathan Gannon, who's really put his mark on this team, and the defense is steadily improving, especially the way they were able to control the Chicago Bears this past Sunday at home. Now, on the offensive side of things, I know Kyler Murray is one of my, dark horse MVP candidates, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is starting to also implement himself within this offense. So there's some good things going for the Arizona Cardinals. They also have had, I guess, it gives us a plus. They've been playing really tough teams early on in the first half of the season. They've had matchups against the Commanders, Bills, Lions, Packers, and the Chargers. The only thing, though, they've only managed to win one game against those teams, and that was the Chargers not that long ago. Now, future matchups, they still have 2 games against Seattle Seahawks, who are struggling, and then they still have to play the Rams, possibly with Christian McCaffrey, and they're going to have to play the 49ers with Christian McCaffrey, and they're going to have to play the Rams this time with Cooper Kupp and maybe Puka Nacua, right? So, because he's still battling some injuries as well. So, but will the Arizona Cardinals win the NFC West? I'm going to say nah. All right, moving right along, the next real or nah. Are the Lions the best team in the National Football League? Let's take a look at it. So listen, the Chiefs are still the remaining undefeated team in the National Football League, but it doesn't mean anything because I feel like the Lions, even though with one loss, have performed or outperformed the Chiefs in pretty much every statistical category that I can think of, at least from an offensive perspective, right? Now, the Detroit Lions are coming off of a very dominating performance, and don't let the score fool you. That 24-14 win over the Packers it doesn't even reflect how that game was. What the Lions were able to do, it shows that they can go on the road, not even go on the road, but go on the road in a cold environment because they are traditionally a domed team. So typically dome teams don't fare well in cold environments, but that's not the case for this Detroit Lions team. Maybe in the past, but not this particular team. That game, they controlled the Packers offensively, defensively, and they've done that in most of their games. Now, they're riding a 6-game winning streak, if I'm not mistaken. And not to mention, they're on a historic run in regards to touchdowns where they're the only team since 1940 to have more touchdowns than incompletions. So 28 touchdowns versus 24 incompletions total. And that's a big part of Jared Goff's success this year so far. He's averaging 82 yards per pass. Completion rate, 13 touchdowns and only 1 interception. So he's one of another guys that's one of those guys that can be talked about as an MVP candidate. And defensively, they've gotten a lot better, which is something that we've kind of hung over their heads a little bit, not being efficient enough. But each and every week, this team is finding ways to be more and more efficient, especially without their top edge rusher and Aiden Hutchinson. So the question is this the best team in the National Football League, real or not? I'm going to say real. In my final real or not, Dak Prescott's injury has officially ended the Dallas Cowboys season. Let's take a look at it. Now, the Cowboys are riding a 3-game losing streak, which they've been outscored 104 points to 54. Now, we've all known the exploits of this team throughout the season. The defense is no good. Offense is no good. Coaching, no good. The player personnel, no good. They can't stop the run. They can't even run the football. There is a plethora of leaky holes on this team. And now Dak Prescott going down for however long it's going to be with a hamstring injury, not to mention that CeeDee Lamb is dealing with a shoulder injury in his own regard. Now, he may give it a go in the next couple of weeks as they get ready for Philadelphia this upcoming week. We'll talk about that game here in just a minute here. But their inability to stop people from scoring is a problem. And it's going to continue to be a problem. And that has nothing to do with Dak Prescott. Offensive inconsistency, too. It hasn't been good with Dak Prescott. Will it be better? Is Cooper Rush going to be the guy? Will Trey Lance get a nod at some point, right? Because a lot of Dallas Cowboys fans have been clamoring for him, thinking that Trey Lance is going to be the answer for this team. But there's just so many inconsistencies with this team overall, and the future outlook of this team is not bright. The owner gets up in front of the press and just starts babbling on, sounding very senile, which we already know. The guy's up in age. And as a former Dallas Cowboys fan, we're tired of it. It doesn't make any sense anymore. The one thing that he cares about is his money, and Dallas Cowboys fans, the ones that still stick around, are going to continue to shell out massive dollars in order for this team to continue thriving from a financial standpoint. So the funny thing about this real or not is the question is, will Dak Prescott's injury affect, or has it basically ended this Cowboy season? Well, I'm going to say nah. And you know why? Because the season was over before they even played one snap of football this year in the first game in September. So nah, Dak injury does not affect this team losing because this team was going to be a bunch of losers anyway. Real or not, is Lamar Jackson the front runner for the MVP halfway through the season? Let's take a look at it. Now, coming off of another stellar performance, the Baltimore Ravens managed to score 41 points on a very vaunted Denver defense. Now, going into this game, Lamar Jackson has a passer rating of 120.9, which puts them up there with the ranks of Tom Brady, Breeze, Peyton Manning, at least do 9 games with a minimum of 200 pass attempts. So just keep that in mind. Now, he also is another quarterback that has been able to throw for 20 touchdowns and rush for 500 yards within the first 10 games of the season. So you look at his team success. Now, some may argue, well, Derrick Henry has a lot to do with that, and rightfully so. He does add another dimension to the Baltimore Ravens offense. But however, though, as a guy who's been very critical on Lamar Jackson over the last couple seasons, I think it's time to really acknowledge the fact that he has evolved. He understands what he is and what he's about and what he's able to do on the football field. His only biggest criticism coming from me is that his inability to win the big games in the playoffs. So, however, though, with that said, the question remains, real or not, is Lamar Jackson the front runner for the MVP halfway through the season? I'm going to say that's a real. All right, let's take a look at some fantasy football impacts for your week 10 matchups in your respective leagues. We're going to take a look at some running backs, receivers, quarterbacks, and some defenses that you may want to put into your lineups if you can go get them, or if you have them on your bench or on your roster, you want to make sure you start these guys. The first guy I want to start with is Ray Davis, is a running back from the Buffalo Bills. Now, he had a pretty good performance this past weekend where he scored a touchdown here in week 9. I believe it was like a 60-yard receiving touchdown. So now he doesn't get a lot of touches, but when he does, he's pretty much he's gotten the most out of them. So if you're one of those guys where you're looking for someone to maybe put in as a flex, he's worth the look there. Another guy who I think this guy is kind of a stretch though because of the team he plays for, Keaton Mitchell from the Baltimore Ravens. Now he's coming back from an ACL injury, but I think there's an opportunity for him to split some carries with Justice Hill there, who I feel like they kind of like Keaton Mitchell a little bit more, but because Mitchell was out, they put Hill in a little bit to kind of spell Derrick Henry. So I'm not going to say this guy's going to go out and win you a league or win you the week. But if you're in a tight spot and you need a running back, he's definitely worth a look. And then finally, as usual, Tyler Algier, if you guys have him, this guy definitely steals a lot of touches from Bijan Robinson, but the crazy thing about it, Robinson averages a good amount of points too in fantasy, and Tyler Algier is right there, not too far from behind him. He does catch the ball out of the backfield and is good on the red zone or goal line as well too. So he's definitely worth a start if you have him or continue to start him. Now let's take a look at some wide receivers. The first one is Quentin Johnston, from the LA Chargers. Now he's had an up and down season. He started off really hot, then he kind of tapered off, but this past weekend, he really did a good job. He scored a 66-yard touchdown, basically after having coming off of an injury. So he's definitely one of those guys who has a potential upside if you're looking at a flex, maybe not as a number 1 wide receiver, but maybe as a number 2 wide receiver or even a flex in whatever league that you're in. Xavier Legette, one of those other guys who's kind of like, it's inconsistent. One week he's really good, next week he's not good. But you got to take it with a grain of salt because look who he's playing with. He's playing for the Carolina Panthers. They're going back and forth with quarterbacks. Now, Bryce Young did show some flashes this past weekend against New Orleans Saints. So definitely a guy who's going to see an uptick in targets. Why, too? Because Deontay Johnson was shipped off to Baltimore. So he's probably going to be their number 1 guy out there. So definitely worth a look at there. Jerry Jeudy, who, pretty nonchalantly had a decent game for the most part, but he's definitely going to be another guy that's going to be competing for those higher volume targets on the Cleveland Browns roster. Between him and Tillman, Jerry Jeudy is one of those guys that you might want to consider. But again, none of these guys, at least Jerry Jeudy or Legette, you can kind of consistently count on. But if you're in a need for a flex, he's definitely one of those guys that you want to maybe take a look at. Now, as far as quarterbacks are concerned, Bo Nix, he does steal a lot of touchdowns from his running backs, especially within the goal line or red zone area. So he could steal you a couple touchdowns here or there. He caught a touchdown this past weekend against the Baltimore Ravens, which was the only touchdown that was scored by the Denver Broncos. So he does have influence in that offense. So definitely, again, if you have a guy that's on a bye week and you need Bo Nix, he is rostered in a good amount of teams, in leagues, from what I've been able to read. So definitely worth a shot. Aaron Rodgers started to pick up his play last week against the Texans. He looked strong. I will say that. He connected with Devontae Adams finally. Those two haven't caught a touchdown pass in quite some time, but maybe they're starting to fix things there a little bit in New York. Now, I'm not going to go say they're going to go on a tear, but definitely worth the watch there or pick up there. And then Justin Herbert, who is steadily increasing his play. The passing volume has increased now, which is kind of ironic because Jim Harbaugh likes to run the football. but I think they're starting to open the playbook up just a little bit more. I would not be surprised if they go out and make some type of deal to get a true number one wide receiver by the trade deadline. I think that would only help Justin Herbert's value and also help this team, especially if there's an increase in the passing volume for this offense. So I like Justin Herbert. As far as tight ends are concerned, Mike Gesicki, Cincinnati Bengals, he's out there. I think he's a strong option if T. Higgins is out. If T. Higgins is out for injuries or anything like that, he's a strong option there for you. But if T. Higgins is there, it's kind of touch and go there. It's kind of touch and go there only for the fact because he has Jamar Chase, and if T. Higgins is in front of him, he's not going to have a lot of targets thrown towards his way. So, but it's always you got to circle it with him. But definitely a guy if you want to look for. Taysom Hill, I was kind of looking at what he was doing, this past weekend. He had 60. I forgot to remember my notes here. 60 yards from scrimmage this past weekend and a rushing touchdown. He isn't what he used to be, right? Obviously, because the New Orleans Saints is not what they used to be. But again, if you're in a crunch and you need someone to throw in that may have an opportunity, then Taysom Hill is one of your guys. Okay. And then finally wrapping up with two defenses here. I'm going to be looking at the New York Giants. They have a good matchup against them coming up against the Carolina Panthers. So listen, anytime you get a defense that's playing the Panthers, Raiders, Browns, hell, even the Cowboys at this point, especially now, teams that struggle to score the ball, or even the Patriots, go pick them up. And that's what I've been doing in my leagues. And honestly, the defenses that I picked the last couple weeks have scored double digits just because I've been playing that type of strategy there. And then finally, the Washington Commanders. Now, people are saying, well, they're playing the Steelers, and Russell Wilson is cooking because he's unlimited, right? But listen, here's the thing. The Commanders defense has gotten better progressively the last couple of weeks. I don't think that's going to stop this week going forward. I think this is definitely worth a look. If you are kind of teetering between a defense that you may like, they're definitely worth a shot there. So there you have it. Those are my fantasy football impacts going into week 10. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Okay, let's jump right into my week 10 previews and predictions around the National Football League. We're going to start with Thursday Night Football. For a pretty good one, I would say. I guess at least a divisional battle between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens, both coming off of really, really good wins. Bengals winning at home against the Raiders, and the Ravens defeating the Denver Broncos in very pretty prolific fashion. Now, the last time these two teams met, it took overtime for the Ravens to kind of to pull that one out. And mind you, the Bengals pretty much probably should have won that game at home. But if it wasn't for some late heroics by their kicker, Justin Tucker, and I believe Derrick Henry too played a good role, and Lamar Jackson as well, Baltimore Ravens were able to get that win. Now, I don't know the status of T. Higgins, if he's coming back for this game. Joe Burrow did look pretty good last week against the Raiders. Mind you, it was the Raiders. I will say this, though. The Baltimore secondary still can be had. They still gave up 122 yards to Cortland Sutton the other day. And you already know Jamar Chase is a way better wide receiver than Cortland Sutton. And if T. Higgins is a go, it's definitely going to put some stress on that Baltimore Ravens secondary. With that said, though, I get it. I know the Ravens have lost a divisional game already to the Browns on the road, and the Bengals actually can play them tough. I still think this is going to be a close one nonetheless, but I'm going to go with the Ravens at home. They don't have to travel. It's a short week. That running game travels. It plays anywhere and everywhere, and I think that's going to be a catalyst for this team moving forward, as we've seen already between Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. I really like the Baltimore Ravens in this matchup here, okay? Okay, moving on. We got the first game of the year in Germany, in Munich, Germany. I don't get why the NFL continues to send some of these teams over there. The Giants really haven't been relevant in quite some time, and we already know the exploits of the Carolina Panthers. Maybe that's why, but you would assume that you would want to send your best to represent your country, but I guess they don't care anyway. But anyway, we got the Giants taking on the Carolina Panthers. Giants, they're looking for something. Of course, a quarterback. They're not getting quite the production that they thought they would have gotten out of Daniel Jones. At least they thought they could have got some production out of him. Really not a consistent run game. The only thing keeping them afloat is their defense for the most part. Guys like Dexter Lawrence, who's playing phenomenal football right now. Probably one of the most underrated defensive players we have in the National Football League. But he's just on a team that's not going to be winning a lot of football games anytime soon. And then you got the Carolina Panthers, who got of their first win for their young quarterback, Bryce Young, last week, and a surprise victory over the Saints. Now, they're looking to keep that streak going. I would say they have a pretty good chance of winning this game. I think the Carolina Panthers, they're a bad football team. Don't get me wrong. And I think Bryce Young is starting to figure out certain things. But in this case, if they were at home, like legitimately at home, I would say they would win this game. But I'm going to go with the Giants to win this game. Giants, just a little bit more veteranship. And I don't know if that's a word, but veteran play from the quarterback, even though it's not very good. I'm going to go with the Giants just because their defensive front line is going to be a lot better than Carolina's. So just for that point there, I'm just going to go with the Giants in that first game in Germany. All right, let's bounce back over to across the pond and take a look at the matchup between the New England Patriots and the Chicago Bears. Bears coming off of a dismal performance in the desert against Arizona. Caleb Williams could not get anything going. You can see the frustration physically from DJ Moore. Matt Eberflus is definitely on the hot seat, which is crazy because after their win in London, they came back home and everyone was like, oh my God, they figured out their offense is looking great. And then the last 2 weeks has just been really not great. I mean, they probably should have won that game against the Commanders last week, but the week before, but they didn't. They lost in the last second Hail Mary. But the offense really didn't look good up until, very late that game. They got some things going. But the only thing keeping them alive afloat is their defense, honestly. Then you look at the New England Patriots, still the young quarterback, Drake May. I will say I'm very impressed by him. Now, they're coming off an overtime loss to the Tennessee Titans on the road, but the fact that he was able to battle them back into that game to force overtime on that crazy play that he made at the end, towards the end of the game there to put them in overtime. They have something with Drake May, I believe so. They just got to find a way to nurture it. However, though, I still like the Bears to win in this particular matchup. Their defense is a little bit better, and I think they still have more explosive players on the offensive side to propel them, especially at home. They're looking. They're at the bottom of the NFC North, but they're still one of their higher ranked teams in the NFC overall. I would say I'm sitting at 4-3 if I'm not mistaken. But they need a win like this to kind of stay in contention of that wild card, and I think they'll be able to do that this week. All right, we got the Buffalo Bills taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Not quite sure who's going to start here. Joe Flacco, pretty. I would say his performance against the Vikings was a little bit less desirable. Didn't play really well, but Minnesota's Vikings defense has been pretty solid for the most part this season. Look, the Colts have talent. I don't know what really their issue is. It is a quarterback play, I will say. Joe Flacco is just a bandage. He's not really someone that's going to really stop the problems that they have. And I don't think you can put Anthony Richardson back in the lineup, considering what had happened to him the last a couple weeks ago when they played Houston Texans, where he, quite frankly, just kind of quit during a play. You can lose a locker room quickly. And I don't know. I don't follow the Colts that intently like that, but I can only imagine that locker room, they may be split, or some of them just are not believing in Anthony Richardson whatsoever. I think the fan base there is kind of fed up with him already. There might be a couple fanboys who really like Anthony Richardson, but really the kid, like I said, I'm off his bandwagon. I don't really think he should be a NFL starting quarterback. With that said, Buffalo's coming off of a pretty close, decisive win over the Miami Dolphins. Like I said, the Bills are like the most adult team in the National Football League. Kind of like the Chiefs, where they don't win pretty all the time, but they're efficient and they find ways to win. And in this particular matchup, I think they'll be able to find their way to a victory on the road in Indianapolis and get the win over the Colts there in this upcoming Sunday, right? So, all right, we got Minnesota Vikings, Jacksonville Jaguars. You know what, man? Like this one's going to be close, I would say. Vikings have not looked really impressive the last couple of weeks. I know they got the win recently on Sunday Night Football, but it kind of got to a point where I'm watching that game and I'm like, this isn't the same team that started off the year, undefeated, right? And then they ran into this 2-game losing streak, and then they let the Colts hang around in that particular game. So I'm a little bit concerned. Don't know what the problem is. If it's coaching, is it the players not executing anymore? God knows what. But they were able to turn it around and get things figured out. So I do like their chances. Jacksonville had a chance to kind of win that game the other night against Philly, but Trevor Lawrence, God knows what he was thinking, what he was doing, throwing that ball up to a running back to high point it, where running backs aren't really taught to high point football. So nonetheless, they still lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. This game's going to be closer than what we think. I'm not really a fan of Jacksonville per se, but there's something about Minnesota right now that's missing. And I'm gonna go with an upset here. I'm gonna go with the Jacksonville Jaguars to win this game. I think it'll be close, but something about the Vikings, I believe they've lost some of their luster, and they need to find that. But I'm gonna go with the Jacksonville Jaguars in an upset. All right, we got AFC West division rivals here. Denver Broncos taking on Kansas City Chiefs. This is a team that just finds a way to win. It doesn't matter how they do it. They just do it, right? And there's a lot to be said about that. They have a championship caliber mentality, as you saw on Monday night where, they were down to Tampa Bay a couple times there. They fought back, and they got that win in overtime. Now, shout out to Tampa Bay for playing a tough game. They did their thing. They fell short in the end, but what can I say about Patrick Mahomes? If there's anyone in the league that you want with the football in late game situations, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. Now, got a little bit scared there late in the fourth quarter where he threw a touchdown pass, came up limping, had to be helped off the field. I know a lot of Chiefs fans were like holding their breath because they're like, oh my God, this could be our season right before us if this guy goes down. Nonetheless, he comes back in, still leads the team to a victory, and their running game is going to be sick. And why I say that is because Kareem Hunt is playing like Kareem Hunt in his first stint with Kansas City. He's getting stronger and stronger as the game go on, and wait till they get Isaiah Pacheco back. It's going to be a double-headed monster for them because right now they still haven't found a way to get the ball going vertically. Now, DeAndre Hopkins did have 2 touchdowns in this past game. Denver's defense is going to have to rebound. I will say this, though. I think they'll be able to match up better than they did with Baltimore because Baltimore's run game is just so prolific right now. And the way Lamar Jackson's throwing the football too is actually really a lot better than Patrick Mahomes statistically, I would say. But I'm not going to count. I'm not going to go. Listen, I'm not going to go against Patrick Mahomes at home against a team who is showing tendencies of being a fraudster. And I'm talking about the Denver Broncos. I don't think they're ready to make that jump. I think a lot of people were thinking, well, wow, they're surprised that they won so many games, 4 or 5 games when they thought they'd probably only win about 3 or 4, right? So they've probably exceeded their expectations, but going into Arrowhead is going to be a problem for them. And I think it'll be a close game as usual, but the Chiefs will get the win. All right, we got the lead, or not the lead leading, but the leaders in the clubhouse for the NFC South. That's the Atlanta Falcons taking on New Orleans Saints. They got a new head coach. Dennis Allen was fired. Falcons are clicking on all cylinders. They've coming off a pretty good win against the Dallas Cowboys. Kirk Cousins, I say this every week, I feel like he's getting better and better. And I feel like the Falcons are coming on, and they're going to be one of those teams that you don't want to see come late January, heading into the playoffs, right? So Saints, to me, they're in jettison mode. They traded Marshawn Lattimore. I think there might be, some other moves. They maybe cut a guy or two, but I don't know. But they're definitely not playing good football at all. After starting the year 2-0, head coach is fired now, losing 6-7 straight games in a row. Then you lose to the Carolina Panthers, mind you, a team that's arguably one of the worst teams in football, and you lose. To me, this is a no-brainer. I know there might be a little bit more juice in the building down there in New Orleans, because sometimes that happens where a head coach gets fired. The team bands together and they come out with a win somehow, but I don't think that'll be the case. I think the Saints are pretty defeated at this point, so I'm going to go with the Falcons. All right, you got San Francisco 49ers taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Christian McCaffrey has been activated off the IR. Not sure what that means for him, if he's going to give it a go this week, or he's just kind of been put into that window or a queue where he can build himself up to get ready to play some games here. Tampa Bay, listen, man, for all it's worth, Baker Mayfield, to me, has established himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the national football, at least top 10, right? His performance with not having Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, he's throwing to guys like Ryan Miller. I don't even know the other guy, Cade Cotton, who's actually becoming a really solid tight end. He did all he could do against the defending champions on Monday Night Football. So I give them a lot of respect. To me, their defense kind of let them down towards the end there. They couldn't really stop the ball. Their linebackers in particularly, Vita Vea put a lot of pressure on Patrick Mahomes on Monday night, but they just couldn't get that win. So I like Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home against the 49ers in this particular game. I think, like I said, Baker Mayfield is the better quarterback to me right now over Brock Purdy. And that might shock a lot of people, but you got to go and give Baker some love, man. So I'm going to give him today, and I'm going to pick the Buccaneers to win this game. We got a big matchup here next, the Pittsburgh Steelers and Washington Commanders. Now, the Washington Commanders made a really good trade for Marshawn Lattimore to help bolster that secondary, which is kind of their weakness, I would say. And then Pittsburgh, they're still coming into their own with Russell Wilson now at the helm. That offense is only going to get better and better. Jaden Daniels is phenomenal right now. Not only is he a candidate for the Rookie of the Year, he's probably also a candidate for MVP, which I've already said that already last week on my NFL Sunday Wake-Up show. This is going to be a really good matchup. If the Commanders want to come out and say, we are one of the better teams, you got to win a game a cross-conference game like this against one of those other teams that's, at the top of the AFC. I like the Commanders at home to win this game. Now, it's not going to be an easy sledding because that defense is going to be ready to go. TJ Watt's going to try to get after Jaden Daniels as much as possible. But what I will say about Jaden Daniels, he doesn't turn the football over. He's very cool, calm, and collected. And I really like that. And you need that type of mentality when you play the Steelers. Now, it's going to be a tight game. It's going to be one of those games where who has the ball last will probably win it. I'm going to go with the Commanders in this one. All right, we got Tennessee Titans taking on the LA Chargers. Chargers looking to build up some steam here, man. I mean, the way they throttled the Cleveland Browns was pretty impressive. Justin Herbert, his passing volume is starting to steadily increase. Quentin Johnson, if he can kind of stay a little bit more consistent, he can present himself as a top tier target for them. Between him and Ladd McConkey and Will Dissly, their tight end there, who's starting to establish a relationship with Justin Herbert. I really like what they're doing there. J.K. Dobbins is getting back to form like he had earlier in the season. And then you got Tennessee Titans. I guess a good win. I mean, a win is a win in the National Football League. You take them how you can get them, and they got one over the Patriots. But I don't think this is going to be well for them this coming weekend. Traveling to LA to take on the Chargers, I think the Chargers will be too much for them. So I like the Chargers in this particular game. All right, got Jets and Cardinals in the desert. Jets fans elated right now, coming off a really good win against a depleted Texans team, but again, a win is a win in National Football League, right? You got to play who's out there, and they did, and they got the win. Now they're taking on a hot Arizona Cardinals team who sits atop of the NFC West. Kyler Murray playing really good football, MVP caliber type of football. Him and Marvin Harrison Jr. really getting that connection going. The run game has been really good, but I would say the key focus in all of this right now is the defense, the way Jonathan Gannon has been able to elevate his defense the last couple of weeks. The Jets, on the other hand, again, Devontae Adams starting to get a little bit more involved. Garrett Wilson looked pretty good against the Texans as well. They're going to have to run the football still, though. But I like Arizona. Arizona is one of those places where it gets loud in there. If you've never had the chance to watch a game live from Arizona, it don't seem like they get rowdy, but that place gets cracking, and it gets really loud, especially when they're going. Kyler Murray's going, and I think they'll be able to get after Aaron Rodgers. So I like the Cardinals in a close. I think it's going to be a shootout, but I like the Cardinals in this one. We got a matchup here between the NFC East rivals here, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. We'll start with the Cowboys here. Dak Prescott out a couple weeks. Cooper Rush, I believe, is going to get the start, which I don't know, man. I think they should probably – I'll say this. Trey Lance is going to get some play here at some point. I don't doubt that he won't. Micah Parsons, I believe, is still another week out. So I'm not sure about the status of DeMarcus Lawrence. He may be another week as well. The Cowboys are struggling. That's documented. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. They made a trade for Jonathan Mingo from the Carolina Panthers. To me, it's not going to move the needle whatsoever. So it is what it is. Philly coming off of another game where they won. They're sitting at, I believe, 6-2. But a lot of people don't feel confident in their 6-2. They're probably one of the most overrated 6-2 teams, I would say, maybe. They're winning games, but some of these games that like they're trying to give them away, but the other teams are taking advantage of it, which is a concern because down the stretch, when especially you get into the playoffs, you're not going to be playing those types of teams. You're going to be playing really good teams that want to win the game, and they will exploit your mistakes. Now, to me, this is a no-brainer. You got to take the Eagles. The Cowboys are not a good football team. The Eagles are a lot better right now, in a better position than the Cowboys. So I'm going to go with the Eagles in this one easily. A pretty fun Sunday night football game. Detroit Lions and the Texans. Now the Texans coming off of a loss primetime to the Jets. Still no Nico Collins. We know Stephon Diggs is out. It's got to be the Joe Mixon show. CJ Stroud has struggled the last couple of weeks, I will say. And it doesn't help that you're playing one of the teams that has a much improved defense. So I don't. On paper, I thought this would have been a better matchup. Obviously, if Nico Collins was healthy, Stephon Diggs was healthy. But I just don't think they have enough. The Lions, to me, have proven that they are the best team in the National Football League. As from top to bottom on paper, and even on the field, they're proving it, right? The only difference is that they're not undefeated. They do have a loss, but still, they have performed and outdueled their opponents the last couple of weeks on this winning streak. So I don't think that trend will stay. I think the Lions will go on the road again and win this very pivotal matchup for them against the Texans in Houston. So I'm going to go with the Lions there. And for the final game of the week, you got the Miami Dolphins heading to LA, to Tinseltown, to Hollywood, to take on the LA Rams. Now the Bills coming off of a close loss to Buffalo. Tua slowly kind of get back in the fold. I know they're trying to get the ball more back to Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle actually had a sighting the other day. He's actually scored a touchdown. But the Rams are playing good football, man. They to go on the road to Seattle, a tough place to play, mind you. If you never had an opportunity to go there and watch a game there, phenomenal place, right? Very loud. They get behind their team. And to go on the road and win a divisional game, a team that knows you, and without Puka Nacua, because he got thrown out first quarter or something like that for fighting or whatever. He threw a punch. But the Rams, to me, are one of those teams that they're going to sneak up on you. I think this last stretch of the season, a couple more weeks left, they're going to start to win a couple games. And I think it's going to continue this weekend. I don't think Miami is not all there yet. I think Tua needs a couple more games to really feel himself, to get back to what he was doing last season. And I don't think it's going to start against the Rams. So I'm going to go with the Rams to round out week 10. So there you have it. Those are my previews and predictions for week 10 in the National Football League here on NFL Matchups. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. That wraps up another episode of NFL Matchups. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure to continue to subscribe to our Grid Network channel. We really appreciate the support as we continue to grow our page. Until next week, this is your boy Ryan Flowers. Like I always say, never settle till the work is done. We'll see you guys soon. Peace.